And welcome to another hour of Gate City Chronicle, the weekly magazine show dedicated to the city of Nashua. I'm Kevin Avard, your host, and today we have a special edition for you because we have some special guests. We have an independent reporter for the New Hampshire Public Radio and the union leader, independent, what are you?
Reporter.
Reporter,
Journalist.
there you are. Thank you very much.
Freelance, yeah.
And we have some special guests from Occupy Nashua. And we'd like to introduce some of our guests. We'll be starting off with you, Teresa, if you would like to talk about who you are, what your background is, and then we'll move on down our guest list.
Okay. Hi, my name is Teresa Earle, and I'm a new resident of Henniker, New Hampshire. I am one of the people who was involved in the organization of Occupy Boston as I was living in Massachusetts for a bit before I moved here, and now have begun participating in the Occupy New Hampshire statewide General Assembly, as well as my local Occupy movement.
Great.
Jerry O'Connor from Methuen, Mass. I find Nashua and Manchester both geographically and culturally, politically, closer to my feelings. In previous life, I'm a retired professor from UMass Lowell. And now I've become a kind of full-time activist, you might say.
Thank you.
My name is Danny Keating. I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I've been active in politics for the last about 3 years. I'm a member of Socialist Alternative, and in the last couple of years, it's been a whirlwind for me, where I've gone to Wisconsin, Occupy Boston, been involved in Occupy New Hampshire, and now pretty much just staying with Occupy Nashua as I live in Nashua. So.
Wonderful.
Hi, I'm Marian O'Connor. I'm a school counselor here in Nashua. I became involved in Occupy Manchester probably a couple of months ago, and the movement's really changed and evolved since that time. But recently, we've begun our own organization of Occupy Nashua.
I'm Jerry Ross. I live in Hudson. I moved back to Hudson recently from Connecticut. I grew up in Hudson but left to go to college, and been sort of involved in social action for a very long time. I was a conscientious objector in the Vietnam War, but for most of my life I ran a mental health center, and now I'm back here semi-retired and interested in social issues. I attended my first Occupy New Hampshire event in mid-October, and then boarded an airplane for New Zealand for a few weeks there, and I was driving into downtown Auckland from the airport, and there was an Occupy Auckland encampment. So I thought to myself, something's going on here.
Mm.
Interesting. I'm Simon Rios. I'm a reporter based in Nashua. I write for the Nashua Telegraph, though primarily now I'm doing stuff for the Union Leader, and I do radio reporting as well for New Hampshire Public Radio, which I'm sure some of you have heard. And I'm glad to be here with you guys today.
Well, welcome you all. I think there's a lot of questions out there. You hear a lot of information on the news, and some of it's true, some of it's misinformation, some of it's good, some of it's bad, and I know that the general question for a lot of people on both sides of the political scale is, what are you all about? Really, what is this all about? What's going on? And if you don't mind, I'd like to start off with Teresa, and again, talk a little bit about your background. You are from the Boston area,
Well, I was staying in Boston when Occupy Boston started, but
Right.
I actually also moved here from Connecticut and was there temporarily while I was waiting to move to New Hampshire. And for me, I, in a past life, was a drug rep for a pharmaceutical company. And I did that for a number of years, and I started to have a lot of questions about the way decisions were made and health choices. I sold insulin, and so looking at diabetes and starting to question, well, why are so many of us so overweight? And looking at all these issues and just kind of saying, wait a minute, there's something wrong. And then Occupy happened. And what Occupy to me is maybe different than what it is for everybody else. For me, Occupy is a way for individuals to learn the power that they have and the power of their voices and their day-to-day actions and their day-to-day responsibilities and their day-to-day choices of what they buy, where they go. I think for me, Occupy is about reminding people that we have all of this power that we don't necessarily take advantage of. And it's not necessarily about, here's our demands, this is what we want. It's about This is what we want. How do we get what we want within the democracy that we've developed?
Yep.
For me.
Now, excuse me, if you would. So Occupy Wall Street started about 3 months ago, maybe 3.5 months ago now. And it came from, previously there was a movement in Spain. I think they called it the Unforgettables movement, to translate. And before that, of course, the Arab Spring, many different countries, the toppling of Mubarak, and now Gaddafi and others in action right now. Do you see the Occupy Wall Street movement or the Occupy movement in general as an extension of those phenomena?
I think, I think Occupy is a global movement. It's not, I mean, it's localized, but it's something, it's all connected. It's everybody coming together and saying, look at the way that we're being governed. It doesn't represent us. It doesn't represent our values. We're gonna speak out about it. And they do it differently in different places. So it might be like it's different in Spain or in Egypt or in any of these other places than it is. So it presents itself different, but it's the same gesture. It's the same intention. It's the same collective wanting to be more fairly represented by your government and have more power in your own day-to-day life.
Well, that begs a question as far as on my part. As far as you brought up the whole idea of values and this being global. I didn't write this question, but now that we're here. The whole idea of, say, those who subscribe to Sharia law, who are of the Arab Spring and are Occupy Egypt or the Spring, how does that coincide with what's going on here on Occupy Wall Street or Occupy Nashua? What are the same values that you're sharing, if there are any?
Well, I don't necessarily think that I'm the best person to speak about Arab Spring or whether or not they're actually proponents of Sharia law. I think that what I've read and what I've heard is that they're proponents of being able to have their voice heard. Okay. And being able to be part of the way that they are ruled, right. And not feeling like they have that. Mm-hmm. I think that the thing about Occupy that gets misunderstood the most often is the 99% part of that. We're the 99%. The 99% doesn't mean we all agree on everything. It doesn't mean that I see eye to eye with everybody that I'm occupying with. It means that I see them. I see them eye to eye from the vantage point that I respect them. I'm willing to listen to them. I'm willing to talk to them and learn from them and come to some kind of way to coexist peacefully while disagreeing. Right. And having that be okay. I mean, I think that the number of people who just feel like the moment you disagree or the moment somebody says something, there's an emotional response is part of what we're trying to work through with Occupy. Because it's a lot of talking about things that, like Sharia law, like racism, like marginalized voices. It's a lot of talking about that and addressing it from a head-on perspective rather than trying to kind of gloss over it.
Right. If I could just switch gears a little bit, and anybody can answer this question. I don't know if any of you read, I wrote a story about a event that you had in front of Kelly Ayat's office. And to kind of balance out the article, I went to one of my neighbors, actually, David Dean, who's an alderman at large in Nashua. And he's a self-proclaimed conservative Republican. And his first question he asked me when I began speaking about your event was, well, where was it? And I said it was in front of Kelly Ayat's office. And his reaction to that was, well, did they go to Jean Shaheen's office after that? And I thought that was a good question because I believe in one of the documents that was available at the first GA, or if it was the second GA, I'm not sure, there was a mention of the movement being transpartisan. So to to demonstrate in front of a Republican's office and not do both offices, or maybe you couldn't have done either of them. Mm-hmm. Anybody care to respond to that?
Yeah, I'll respond to that because that's so interesting. I'm glad you asked that, Simone, because it came up last night at our GA. We actually were just talking about that coincidentally, that originally we had planned to stop at both offices of Office Shaheen and at the offices of Kelly Ayat. It was freezing cold that day, and so and it was our very first Nashua event that we had organized. So we took the time to meet each other. Sometimes it's a little bit awkward. You have people coming that have never come out to a demonstration before, have never protested before. We really wanted to make people feel welcome. So we stayed at Kelly Ayotte's office, and from that point marched up the street to the Unitarian Church where we held a GA. We talked about it last night. We said, yeah, you know, that's right. We really never got back to protesting outside of Shaheen's office like we originally intended to do. So that's on our agenda, and I think that this weekend there may be a protest outside of Shaheen's office as well.
And what is, yeah.
I'd just like to jump in here, though, for a moment, because I'm not so sure that's a good question. It seems to me that one of the problems we have is a tendency for the media and for people in general to look for oversimplification of issues and problems and quickly to kind of see things in a bipolar way. Either this is good or bad, or it's Republican or Democrat. And I think our world is more complicated than that. I think the problems we face are more complicated than that. And that of all the various issues that are being talked about in the Occupy movement, one issue at least is that we really want to have a more intelligent dialogue about our problems. And we'd like to have people who are in the public arena take up a discussion of our problems in a more intelligent way than sort of whose office are we demonstrating in front of, or which is the good guy and which is the bad guy, because things are a little, again, I think more complicated than that, and we need to find some solutions that kind of go beyond partisan politics.
Right.
But you, if you don't mind me saying, that
Yeah.
this could easily fall into partisans if you actually do one side, and you could appear, whether you intentionally or not, to be partisans. That would seem to be, you know, as far as it being transpartial?
It's actually nonpartisan.
Nonpartisan.
It got
so-
changed in the proposal.
Okay, so
If I may,
Sure.
it might be nonpartisan, but again, if we were choosing a supply place to occupy last week, we would go to Lowe's and not Home Depot for very specific reasons that we're all familiar with. The, you know, removal of the sponsorship from the Muslim Family Show. There was a widespread, you're not familiar with that?
I'm familiar with that,
Okay,
yes.
sure. Well, Lowe's, to most people, caved into one racist, actually pornographer in Florida, and exhibited the worst form of corporate cowardice and bigotry. So you do pick your spots. It's Occupy Wall Street, not Yankee Stadium,
Right.
for a reason, because that's where the power is. And I would, you know, flip Teresa's coin and say, you know, we have a voice and power, because we're just discovering that we really haven't had any power for a very long time.
Which leads me into my next question, if you don't mind me asking, and that's pretty much about crony capitalism.
Oh, sure.
And that seems, if I may just do a little segment on this real quickly, it seems to affect both parties. And there is no doubt that there are cronyism on both sides.
No
There's
doubt.
lobbyists on both sides.
No doubt.
When our politicians are up at the Capitol and they're banking and they're making money on Wall Street by some of the laws that they know are going to be coming into effect, yet the average citizen
Right.
cannot have that same right, that insider trading.
Yeah.
And I know some of the senators and some of the congressmen since this depression, and I will call it a depression, if you will, has been about, their income has some of them have gone up 69%. And that's on both sides. It's not just one, but on both sides. And cronyism is a problem. And a lot of us can't stand it here at the Capitol. We're sick of it too.
Yeah.
But we want to, like you said, bring this intelligent discussion about this and hold some people accountable. And this whole idea of transparency needs to be out there. And I gather that's really what you folks are really trying to get at, is this transparency. But if somebody would take up the cronyism, I'd appreciate it. Where you know?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I may pose a question back to saying, when can you give me an example of a time in American history where that didn't exist? You know what I mean? I can go back to, you know, the building of the railroads in the United States where we gave away hundreds of millions of acres away for free because this senator was a friend with this railroad tycoon. It pretty much seems to be ingrained in the system and enmeshed with the system. Just like you said, it's both parties. You know what I mean? It's not like it's just one party taking corporate money. You can watch it slosh from side to side depending upon the election or who they want to get elected. Maybe you can watch 2000 to go to Bush and then 2008 to go to Obama. It's the same people, just different places. It depends on what they want. And I think, yeah, transparency is something we all really want, but there's people coming from a lot of different angles at this. And so it's hard to just pinpoint it's this, it's transparency, it's money in politics, it's this and that. I think, you know, like we said, it's a dialogue where we have to come to these ideas, because I'm sure that I have drastically different ideas than, say, Jerry or someone else, but I wouldn't force it on them. I would just say that crony capitalism has pretty much been a part of the system since the beginning, and if you want to get rid of it, you should take money out of politics, but I really doubt that that's really going to stop the system as it is.
I was just going to react.
Go ahead, Jerry.
I think one of the common themes, you talk about cronyism, I think if you look beyond, what's the driving force of cronyism? So often it is money. And I think that is a general concern of a lot of people who are involved in the Occupy movement, and that is the role of money in our political system, and the concept that somehow money is free speech is a concept that is very troubling because it raises kind of fundamental questions of democracy and one person, one vote. So yes, cronyism, but what's behind that cronyism, I think, is a concern, and that is the way in which money is distorting or is at work in our political system.
Right. To coin a word that Teresa talked about, she said about being marginalized, correct? And I'll lead to you after. I just want to talk a little bit about this marginalizing. There was one presidential candidate that came on my show. His name was Buddy Roemer, and he actually addressed you know, the whole.
I've heard him several times.
Yeah, and he was walking through the crowds in the you know, March on Wall Street, and he was talking to them as well, and he was talking about how corrupt our system is. I love our Constitution, and I think it is a marvelous document, and I think from time to time it is being slowly chipped away at through cronyism, through a lot of this political, the money and special interests. And what was intended to be a good thing, these PACs and lobbyists and special interests have been just chipping away at the American system that was set up by our founding fathers that really had a good intention and has given liberty on many fronts. But somehow it's gotten twisted. And I think that's what this is about, correct? That the system has gotten so twisted and so, I'm trying to think of a word. Perverse, that it needs an overhaul. Not our Constitution, but the people who are entrusted with our Constitution.
I couldn't agree with you more if you started again with, say, the tax code. Let's start with that, right? John Paulson, hedge fund manager, makes $5 billion, earns, quote, pays 15%. People who on his yacht, the crew, they pay 25% or more.
So wouldn't a flat tax be the best interest? Wouldn't be?
I think you should start with overhauling every shelter, loophole, you know, which egregiously favor those in power, the wealthy corporations. Big Oil, ExxonMobil, GE, they don't pay taxes. They get rebates. Now, the average person, like we are here, we pay taxes. The old cliche of, you know, two things you can count on, death and taxes. Oh, no. GE and ExxonMobil, Boeing, that's not true anymore. They don't pay taxes.
You know, if I can just throw something, I hate to, I'm not trying to jump all over you. I know you have questions too. Do you want to ask a question before I ask mine?
Why don't you go ahead, because you already...
Well, regarding the taxes, you know, and the rich people, I mean, everybody has the American dream that they want to be well off. Some want to be rich, some want to be well off and have extra. Then there are those that don't work at all and choose not to work. And there are those that do. And they stand in line with their BET their card, and they buy stuff without having to work for it. And I think, to ask a fair question, there are those that are paying 60% of their taxes, and then there are those who are not paying any. And yet are
Like GE.
like GE, fine. I'll agree with you.
Not the guy on food stamps.
Right, and
Get the music.
but GE,
Representing
correct.
the system.
GE is not paying any taxes. Neither is the person who's collecting money for free.
GE has over 900 employees, accountants and lawyers, who work all year to send in 2010, a 20,000-page tax return to get back money. At the same time, GE is outsourcing, sending jobs overseas. I mean, you can't sell that to a typical person who pays his or her taxes.
Right.
That to us is criminal. It's borders on what they used to call in the old days obscene.
Right.
So that's where I come from.
And I think, and I want to just rebut that also. A person or an individual who chooses not to work, some of us have a right to choose not to work. If we choose not to work, that's our choice. A lot of people suffer from mental illnesses, have other things going on in their lives that make them unavailable to work at the time.
But are you entitled to money then?
I think that if a person is out of work for whatever reason that they're out of work, maybe they got laid off from their job, maybe they're sick, they have cancer. I've been speaking with a woman who recently lost her home up over near Toll Street up in the French Hill. She had cancer. She was unable to work. She has lost her home. Her home is now in foreclosure. And this is a type of situation that we can't help but to be in those situations.
Could I add just one thing? I think we're talking about some extreme situations, and some of which I think are myths. I don't think that's what is so much driving so much of the concerns that are being expressed by Occupy. I think it's that there's a sense that the system is rigged. It's not the person who is not working and collecting money. It's a sense that people are following the rules, they're working hard, and guess what? All of a sudden, they're losing their homes. Guess what? Now there's no more jobs. There's a sense that this is not a level playing field. The system has been distorted and rigged. You can maybe suggest there's all kinds of reasons why this has come about, but the fact is right now, there are a lot of people hurting, and a lot of people really feel that there's not a way out of this. And our representatives in our government really don't seem to be tuned in to the numbers of people that are feeling real pain in our system right now.
Real quick,
Simone?
I just want to say something, actually. I was actually recently unemployed for a year and a half. I've been working in construction since I got out of the military, and through no fault of my own, through the overproduction of the market and the destruction of the housing economy, I lost my job. I didn't choose not to work. I want to work.
Granted.
So therefore, when I'm out of work for a year and a half, and I have people telling me, oh, you're lazy or this and that, you're collecting money, I get taxed on that money that comes in. So it's not free money. I pay for that money. And so that's what brought me out to Occupy in the first place, is the whole economic crisis. Right. And then I see, well, you know, what our leaders and the two parties have to offer. They have stimulus on the one hand, which just puts money in the pockets of the rich, and then austerity on the other hand, which just blames the poor for problems they didn't even create. While the bankers still, oh, we'll just hand out more bonuses this year, and you can get a job in the administration, and then you can do this and do that. So that's what moved me out into the streets. And
right. But you were willing to work. You're willing to go out there and
as all working people are.
As all working people are. That's right. Simone, I wanted to go to Simone because I've been jumping all over you. So.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of follow up on that, I think there is some truth to what you're saying. There are individuals out there that just collect off the food stamps. I think that's blown out of proportion by people who generally want to attack the social network and the advances that have been made in U.S. labor history. But I wonder if, as members or representatives of the Occupy movement, if you think that those folks should also be part of the equation when considering. We're talking about accountability, corporate accountability, government accountability. What about the accountability of the individuals out there? And I know some that Representative Avard is referring to.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I honestly think that personal accountability has a lot to do with the Occupy movement. Yes, we're looking for accountability from the government, from those people we've elected to represent us. It's natural that we should. We should look for accountability from the businesses that we do business with, and we should look for accountability from each other. We should look at each other and be able to say that if you say you're going to do something, you do it. If you stand for something, you stand for it. And we should be supporting each other as well. Now, I agree that there are people who are abusing the social systems that we have set up. I don't think that there's any real, I don't think it would be intellectually honest to say that there aren't. However, when you look at the proportionate amount of money that goes to those people versus going to the subsidies for these corporations, to these wars that I don't know many people who support, there is a proportionate disconnect between that, and the number on that side of the individuals is much lower than the blatant abuse of the trillions of dollars that are being spent to not represent us, but to represent the interests of the people who are paying for our elected representatives to be reelected.
So as far as the stimulus money and the trillions of dollars that we're passing on to our children's debt, 15 trillion at this particular time, which is equivalent to our GDP.
$30,000 per individual.
30,000 per individual, 133,000 per taxpayer. And they want more money. They want to tax more money. Is that the solution? Is that the solution for our countries, is to tax more people when our representatives...
More people who can afford it, and who are not paying what they should be paying. Yeah.
Well, a flat tax, I think, is part of that.
But the thing is, if we... I'm sorry, I'll get to you. But if we tax at 100% all the millionaires and billionaires, that barely touches $1 trillion.
Oh, I'd like to check your math on that.
I would definitely like to...
You're going to tax all the billionaires
At
at
100%.
100%, and that's not going to make a dent in our debt?
Oh, I'm sure it'll make it a dent, but you have $15 trillion.
And
That's...
15 trillion.
And once we wipe out all their income, then what? So
Well, I don't think
Well, this
anyone
isn't
is
about wiping away
proposing
all their income. I mean, come on. Nobody's trying to say that you shouldn't. Well, maybe there are people trying to. I shouldn't speak for anyone but myself. I personally don't have any problem with individuals wanting to make a really good living and wanting to be wealthy and wanting to be comfortable. I have no problem with that. I support the idea of a flat tax. But to cover $15 trillion, you have to look at every decision you're making. Our senators, our congressmen, they make phenomenal amounts of money. They make huge amounts of money. They get health care that that their state employees, their federal employees don't get. They get retirement that their federal and state employees don't get and that most people don't get. It's looking at the system and looking at where you can reduce. I personally think they deserve a pay cut. Everybody else is getting pay cuts.
Can I get an amen?
Getting health care cuts. I mean, why should somebody make $150,000 a year? It plants a seed for desperation to keep your job when you're making so much more money than everybody around you.
So a $4 million Christmas vacation to Hawaii probably is ticking you off too as well.
You know,
Correct.
maybe cut back on a vacation. I mean, or take it out of your pocket and pay for it yourself. I mean,
To
I
be
think
fair,
that there's
right?
a lot to be done.
To be fair, all the politicians need to cut back. I mean, we're looking at, and I am going to single out the president just for a second. A $4 million vacation to Hawaii. Wow.
See, I really think that leads us into sort of a partisan discussion.
Well, not
It's
necessarily,
the reason
because
we're here.
it will
I
go
think
to both
if
sides.
you're interested in hearing what people who are involved in the Occupy movement are all about, we're going to have to talk about other kinds of things than which politician is taking a vacation to which particular part of the country. Because a whole lot of politicians are taking a whole lot of vacations, but that's not why people are out and involved in Occupy.
Okay, but if I may disagree, the point is that we're looking at abuses, and he being the chief executive, as well as on both sides, and I totally concur, that the politicians are making a lot of money. They walk in with maybe $500,000 in their coffers, and they leave with hundreds of millions of dollars in their coffers.
I think money is a very serious problem in our political system.
And it is, and both sides are guilty.
Sure.
And that being the case, you know, pox on both sides, and you folks are bringing that to light. What I'd like to ask is about solutions. What are some of the remedies? I sit on a redress of grievance at the House, and when somebody comes up and they say, well, we have this grievance against the state, we have a grievance against DCYF or against the judges, we ask them, well, what is your remedy? What is your remedy? What are some of the solutions? Because I think we could be here for hours talking about both sides of the political spectrums.
We've already given you two, right?
What is the first one?
Change the tax code was one, and get the money out of politics.
Okay.
We all agree here among us that the decision by the Supreme Court, so-called Citizens United decision, which makes an election an auction, is probably the worst decision by the court since Dred Scott. I mean, it's outrageous. Classic example, super PAC money in Iowa has destroyed Newt Gingrich in 2 months, right? Where's that money coming from? Super PACs. Romney and Ron Paul blasted Newt Gingrich, easy to blast, big, you know, like a dirigible, he's an easy target. But that's what we're talking about. Get the money. If you watch Dylan Radigan ever at 4 o'clock, MSNBC, central theme, get the money out of politics.
But once it's there, and it is there, for instance, on one side there's $1 billion in a coffer, and then on the other side, and of course the taxpayers are funding part of the campaign as well, and on the other you have people who want to be like Buddy Romer, who won't take more than $100.
Yeah, Buddy Romer. He's
all right.
Old guy, old.
But what are the odds? What are the odds of changing that now? Is that how can we do it right now with all this money already in the bank?
Talk on that.
I think it all goes back to part of that personal accountability. I think it goes back to understanding what a democracy is, understanding that what your personal responsibility is as part of a democracy. And that includes being responsible for where you shop, what you do, whether you plant your own food, whether you buy seeds that are heirloom seeds or seeds from Monsanto, who has corrupted the entire agricultural business in this country. It's being aware that's going to make these changes. It's not just, there's nothing that, it's as complex as every other part of this conversation. There's no dartboard that you can say, I'm going to throw this there and it's going to hit right there and that's going to fix it. This has taken a long time to get to the situation that we're in, and it's going to take equally as long, I believe personally, to find our way out of it. And we're not going to find our way out of it by pointing fingers and saying, you did this, blah, 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 give us this. That's why I personally am glad that Occupy hasn't come out with any demands, because there shouldn't be any demands. We should be our own solution. We are people. We can run for office. We can make choices about where we spend our money. We can start building cooperative businesses together where we start using our buying power to do other things. There are a lot of things that we can do as individuals to change the situation without looking to somebody else to fix it for us. Yes, there's a part of it that's going to be like constitutional amendments to overturn corporate personhood. Possibly, I've heard people talking about publicly financed elections. There are a lot of things that we can do within personal realms and political realms to try and affect change that isn't saying, you do this for me or you fix this for me.
The other thing, too, is this movement is still really young. It's only been since September that in the United States we've begun to wake up with the social conscience of America. People are finally starting to realize and wake up and pay attention to people, this movement, which is spoken out. And I think in regard to people who aren't with us on the sidelines or are staying home, people are curious. People do want to know more. They want to know how they can become involved. I've heard from several members of our minority population here in Nashua about how can the Latinos become involved in Occupy? Where is our voice? We want to be part of this too. So it is still very young, and also don't forget the power in the Take Back the Banks Day. There was a lot of power in one suggestion that came from one individual to say, on this day, I'm going to take my money out of a big bank and I'm going to put it in a smaller community bank, in a credit union. And that one event trickled to thousands and thousands of people who all agreed, yes, we're going to do that too, and let's see what kind of an effect it has. And it did have an effect.
I did do that.
I would like to ask a question here, if that's okay. I know you don't want to talk about any specific demands, or that the movement should have, you know, a certain list. Although Michael Moore, for example, I don't know if you guys saw that, he proposed some ideas.
Right.
I would like to go around the circle, and we can even include
Sure.
anybody who wants to answer. And if
I'm
each person can say one or two of the demands that they would like to see, one or two things that they would like enacted either at the federal or the local level. How would you respond to that? One or two things would you like to see done?
Okay, so I'm the first in line. And I'm going to start by agreeing with what Marianne said, that this is a very, very new movement. We are in the beginning stages, and there are a lot of different interests. You know, the people on K Street have been there a long time formulating demands.
Yeah.
I think it is too early for the Occupy movement to articulate a set of demands, even though I may agree with Michael Moore's 10 points. I think that they were pretty good points. So I'm not going to respond to that. And I don't represent Occupy. I only represent myself.
Okay.
As for me, I'm going to go along with what Jerry says. I don't want to say that I represent Occupy Nashua. I'm only representing myself. But I'm also, I work for the city. I work for families who are low income and who struggle. And I think that's one of the reasons that's connected me, is a lot of the cuts that have happened in the state affect me personally and affect how I do my job and perform my job. And economic struggle and hardship is a human struggle, and is a human hardship that our community is facing. Our community right now is in an economic crisis, and I see it because it affects my students and the families that I work with, kids who can't expect much for Christmas. And where does that fall down on? It falls down on me and other teachers to try to pull together and make sure that children are fed and children are clothed. And so to me, it's just about that economic disparity and making, and that it's a hardship for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually support the idea of demands. I mean, I think we should be very clear with them eventually, but it is still an amorphous thing right now, and I respect the idea that, you know, waiting longer is a better idea for right now. But when it comes to me or other activism I do, I think the two-party political system is completely corrupt, completely awash with money, completely incapable of representing the interests of the 99% of the vast majority of working people. And then we need to break from them and start our own political party, free from corporate interests, completely transparent, and actually run in the interest of the millions of people instead of the millionaires. And then just for some pragmatic things, I mean, if you go back to World War II, the only other time when our GDP was our debt was 100% of our GDP, you taxed the rich and you end the wars, first off. And then you create a jobs program, just to kick the economy off, just to start kicking it off. But that's just pragmatism. That's not even, you know, my radical views.
So tax the rich and end the wars
And
right
end the
away.
wars and start a political party for working people.
And you think that that will address some of these other concerns, like what Marianne was talking about?
I think it will start to address them, and it can also give power in social movements. People really learn their power once they get a victory. Once they see that we can move the entire world just by standing together. And of course, you know, we get some victories behind our belt, and you'll see our numbers grow larger.
Well, of course, I grew up in the middle of the Great Depression, so I have a few years on most people here. And I think I can modestly say I've been trying to fight the good fight for, a long time, 50 years. Let's say the gay people who are marginalized and outcast. I have a family, I'm not gay, but I've seen those people as demonized by society. And then I hear this, if I may, homophobic moron, on the guy from Texas, right? Just, trying to dehumanize people who are gay. I find that just outrageous, okay? But the other side, to give you something to enjoy, I don't find Obama's $4 million vacation at all a problem. I have more of a problem with his appointing Timothy Geithner from Goldman Sachs to replace Henry Paulson from Goldman Sachs. Do you think you're going to get any different? You're not going to get, Danny's point is it's the same. And about 2 weeks ago, I believe, Obama is in at a $35,000 a plate dinner hosted by Goldman Sachs. Do I think he's going to change the system? I'd be pretty naive if I thought so. Well, I think maybe somebody down in Massachusetts, we think it might be Elizabeth Warren. You need somebody to start. And I think maybe for me, she's a start, okay?
For me, I occupy looking at, and as I look at what I want from my experience with Occupy, as I said, I want people to understand the power of their voice. But yes, I want corporate personhood overturned. I am not going to fake that I do not have that demand of myself and of Occupy. I want it overturned because everybody else's issues, even my issues with agriculture, healthcare, all these other things, none of them can even be addressed in any type of a meaningful way until you've taken out the barrier to entry. Because you cannot have a voice when everybody who's elected and in office is essentially bought off, essentially representing the people who are maintaining their livelihood, making sure that they get reelected, and if they don't get reelected, that they have a lobbying job that they can go to once they're finished. I mean, I think that is the most important thing that I'm looking for out of the Occupy movement, outside of teaching people the power of their individual voice and how to be autonomous and think as an independent person about how you think that you should be approaching different subjects.
I'm on the side of actually reducing the size of our federal government. I think it's way top heavy, and the bureaucracy is not sustainable, and it needs to get back into individual states' rights. And I think that in itself will be a tough medicine for our country, but I think we absolutely need to get back to a simpler form and reducing this top-heavy federal government.
We did fight a civil war about that, right?
I believe we did. And speaking about the Civil War, seeing how you brought that up, recently I think there's some legislation that is changing the habeas corpus law.
NDAA.
I'm sorry?
NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's horrifying. I mean, and not even, and taking out of the...
Could you explain what that is?
Oh, okay. Well, so the National Defense Authorization Act, if I'm getting this right, is the annual bill that goes through to get defense funding budgeted for the year. And normally, they'll stick something in that's not too terrible, but this year they decided to stick something in saying that if you are a terrorist, you can be detained without warrant, without charges, without evidence, indefinitely. And in there somewhere, there's a little piece that says this does not apply to American citizens. However, it doesn't necessarily say that clearly enough that people feel like they can trust that it's not going to be used on American citizens. Further, it says that it can be used on terrorists without defining what a terrorist is, which wouldn't be so concerning if occupiers weren't being called terrorists for peaceably assembling. Because when you start doing that, there is a slippery slope that's basically, you don't think the right way, so we're going to put you over in a little detention center indefinitely with no charges because you're not complying.
So you could be called an occupier, a Tea Party, a Christian, a Muslim, an enemy of any sort, and be considered a threat to the federal government of some sort or national security, be detained without any probable cause other than, hey, this person's a threat. I find that absolutely alarming. I find that a threat to every American citizen.
Well, if you too support our Constitution, or if you value our Constitution, then this is something that should be alarming to you.
That's why I brought it up. And because it hasn't been like this since the Civil War. Something's wrong here. We're one definition away from the military knocking on your door, labeling you a threat. Now, I might be blowing this out of proportion. I'm a conservative Republican, and I'm sitting here with you occupiers as far as we are still American citizens. We still have our Constitution, which guarantees our equal rights as individuals.
And freedom of speech.
And freedom of speech. And we have that common ground. We are a republic, first. A nation of laws, not of men. And in my opinion, this whole idea with the military having this authority is greatly alarming.
So then you should occupy.
I am. I'm at the State House, and I'm making my voice known. And I do represent my people, and I do listen to the people. And go ahead.
I'd like to segue into, as we have two media people here. I would like to ask you, what impact do you think Fox has on the country?
Well, I think for a long time, personally, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, they're all part of the big corporations. I mean, I don't agree with everything that's on Fox either. I think they all have their bent. I don't know if they're necessarily true conservatives. I don't know if they're. I know they lean to the right, but I also know the other ones lean very much to the left. And whether it's NPR or CNN, they all have their bent. You can't help it. We're people, and they do speak out for, and there is a market for those people, and that is part of the free market. However, the problem with the news, in my opinion, is big money behind both sides. Both sides. There really is. And to be intellectually honest with it, we have to say, yes, there's a lot of money behind ABC. There's a lot of, or CBS or NBC. There is, and somebody's pushing those buttons. Somebody's editing. Somebody's making the decisions at the New York Times. Somebody's making these decisions, and there's a lot of money. I could totally agree with you on that.
I would like to intervene there.
Yeah.
That I think that when you talk about both sides, I'm not quite sure which two sides you're talking about.
Well, left, right, that's
Yeah.
all. Left, right.
Murdoch is on one, and who's on the other?
George Soros.
So are we talking about
Soros,
both
okay.
sides as in both political parties? I'll ask Danny. I know he's always passing out socialist magazines.
Yeah.
Real low scale. Probably low budget type of things, and that's the leftist press. I think you would probably laugh at the notion that CNN or MSNBC actually represents the left of a political spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, they're center-right at best. I mean, if you want to watch mildly left or at least liberal, you could watch Democracy Now! Or something. But really, to get independent news, you have to go out there on your own. I mean, to say that something's a little far left and it's backed by, one of the 5 major media corporations, really? Come on.
Right.
No corporation supports the far left.
So you have the left and right of a spectrum that already kind of is way to the right. I
Yes.
feel like that's what you're saying.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So one is to the left of the other, sure, but in a real, the full sense of a political spectrum, it's still a very limited kind of discourse.
And it seems that target is moving. You don't know there's not a definite, this is the norm for left, this is the norm for right. That target is always moving. But traditionally, and within people's perspective, I think, or perception, there's one left, one is right, according to at least my definition. Of course, yours will be different.
For sure.
Yeah.
I heard very little discussion of the National Defense Authorization Act on any of these media outlets. I'm not sure what the difference
Well,
is.
and that's
The
the
ACLU has been all over, right?
Yeah, the ACLU
Sure.
has been. But I think that, the other reality is that the news there is no law saying that the news needs to be truthful or that it needs to represent what's going on that affects people. The news is ratings-based. If the news wasn't ratings-based, then that might take some of the push for that polarizing, very drama-inducing newscast that you get every night that is focused more focused on things that have little to do with us but will keep us scared, and less to do with what we should actually be scared of. Like I don't watch the news. It's too violent. There's too much violence on the news for me to watch it. So I get my news from all independent sources. And I do that because A, it doesn't apply to me, and my heart breaks every time I watch it. And B, It's all based on ratings. If you look at the target, the questions that we've been asking people for the past 30 years in those polls that people do, there used to be like 50 issues that people would be talking about. Then it went down to 13, and then since like 1980, it's been like 8 issues that we are constantly fighting about. And that's because those are the 8 issues that we're being force-fed to look at. I do not mean to sound disrespectful, but I don't think that I'm as interested in arguing about abortion right now. I'm not as interested in arguing about parental rights. I'm interested in arguing about getting our lives back on track as a nation and taking care of ourselves so that we can take care of each other. It's not my business if somebody's having an abortion. It's not my business if somebody's smoking pot. It's not my business. None of it's my business. My business is, do you have a place to sleep tonight? Because if you don't, I really would like to try and help you out. Do you need a job? If you don't, let me try and help you find that. I really find the polarizing part of the newscast is what's one of the reasons that the NDAA isn't being talked about. Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, the 17th was not talked about. I went to a convention on the 24th and sat there and talked to people the entire time. Have you heard about Occupy Wall Street? Every one of them's looking at me saying, no, what's that? Until finally I met somebody who was an organizer, and then I started organizing Occupy Boston.
So I would want to take just a little bit of issue with you because
Okay.
If on the parental rights and on abortion, if you will. And the reason I would, because those who are pro-life, which I am.
I'm personally pro-life.
But the reason I find that if we don't protect, from my perspective, and I'll listen to yours, but if there's a person, if we regard somebody as a human life, whether inside the womb or outside the womb, we want to guarantee them the rights afforded to everybody. And that's from a pro-life perspective.
Okay.
We're going to agree to disagree, however, whatever.
Well,
Parental rights is another issue. When you have that child, if the state can say, well, you have no right to that child, we're just going to lend that child to you, believe me, that's the perspective of some. That's why there are others on the other side of that issue that say, well, this is a very concerning thought. When, just as much as the military having the authority to come in to arrest somebody because they're deemed an enemy of the state, the same way with the parental rights. If the state can say, well, we don't think you're treating your child right, therefore the homeschoolers, we're going to take your child away from you. Well, that's an issue.
With all due respect,
That's a freedom issue.
Yeah.
It's a
With all
freedom
due
issue.
respect, these are interesting discussions.
Right.
But I really don't see how it's kind of central to what Occupy is about.
Okay.
I mean, there are important questions about individual accountability that are related to that. But I think if this deteriorates into a pro-life, pro-abortion...
It's not deteriorating. The point is, I'm
it
not
sounded to me, I just
No,
wanted...
I don't think it is. But I think that what it is doing is showing exactly how the news and the media that we watch every day influences the conversations that we are capable of having. Because I understand what you're saying. I would say that from my perspective, I have a different perspective. That's all I'm going to say about it. I don't necessarily, anyway. The parental rights issue, in Massachusetts, there was a man who was arrested for going to school because he didn't want his son to be part of a day of education about homosexuality. He didn't want his son to be part of that conversation. He went to the school and asked when they were doing it. They refused to tell him. He refused to leave. They had him arrested for trespassing. And the court decided that the school had as much right in what he was doing in that child's upbringing as the parent. I have a problem with that. But that's not a federal issue. That's a state issue, as far as I'm concerned. The state of Massachusetts does not have that right, and the federal government doesn't have that right. But it doesn't need to be all over I was in Connecticut when that happened, and I heard it in Connecticut. And I think that what's happened is that people take the news takes issues that are sticky, puts them in your mind, and then turns up the volume as loud as possible.
And that is for ratings, of course. And the reason I did bring that up as well is because I do sit on the grievance committee, and some parents' rights are trampled on. And I find that offensive. I find that extremely offensive, and we go out to advocate for them. And when the government gets rogue and starts abusing and taxing to the point of abusing, the people need a voice. That's all I'm trying to get at.
Right,
And it's not just the media. I just wanted to, it's
Well, I
happening.
think your point is well taken, is that it's not a question of big government or little government, it's a question of good government. And you can have very good things done by collective action through laws and government, and you can have some very bad things done. It's really not a sort of a question, in my mind, of big or little.
Right. I wasn't trying to degenerate the conversation into, these other topics, other than that these things still happen, whether the media focuses on it or not, within the state government and within local government and federal government. So, listen, I don't want to hog it. Go ahead.
No, that's good. So one thing that I think you probably all can agree on that is an issue for Occupy in general is that it is largely white and it's largely middle class, and perhaps there are other privileges, and maybe gender comes up or sexuality arise in the Occupy movement. Is this the case? And if it is, what can be done? What should be done to rectify that?
I can talk about from Occupy Boston's perspective,
All right.
because we've had to deal with that.
Can I just make one little programming note?
Okay.
We're up to about an hour in our programming, and so if we can, on this topic, maybe end it up, and then we'll, everybody can speak on it, obviously, but then we'll end up wrapping it up from this point on. So we'll,
Okay, well, from the Occupy Boston perspective, we're actually dealing with this in a pretty big way. And with the reality that it exists, and then the other reality of how do you deal with this. Because the natural tendency seems to be to try and kind of say, oh, it'll fix itself, it'll resolve itself. We'll just, as things go, we'll figure this out.
Kind of a market-based, like the same way the market will figure everything out. So
yeah, like I don't even know if it's that intentional. It's people have a lot that they want to focus on, and they don't necessarily understand the nuances of what oppression looks like in terms of how people are oppressed, the words that are used to keep people oppressed or to make people feel like marginalized or not included. I think there's a lot that needs to be done as individuals in terms of learning what that looks like. So what I've tried to do with Occupy Boston is put together, and we'll see if I can do it, a day of nonviolence communication training and anti-oppression training so that people can kind of understand what that looks like. Because I don't think until people can see it, they can address it. But the things that you're trying to address are issues that are as old as any other issue that we're talking about today. I mean, racism, sexism, discrimination based on sexual orientation, those are all things that have been going on for, I guess I could say forever, though I would have no frame of reference for it. I mean, it's going to take a while to figure it out.
would you like to comment on that as well?
Well, I'll tell of, coming from another direction that from Big Brother and on is, very popular to demonize government. I would argue that government is necessary. There is a balance between, say, freedom and security. And in a community, whether it's a stop sign or a license you need to drive a car, or the Merrimack River that when I grew up in Lowell, you couldn't, if you took a jump in, you wouldn't get out, you'd be gone. The government, let's say, cleaned it up a bit. That over the years, not just the interstate highways and national parks, more than the military, right? We all know that the government works in the military. That's why, we're not speaking German. But the mandate as a pejorative term, right? Well, there are mandates everywhere from the government, right? Beginning with the red light at the end of the street. We live in a society where government, and the wackos of the Latter-day Saints in Texas are a good idea, maybe the government at some point probably has to step in, right? And say, these kids are being demonized by some crackpot visionary who thinks he's, David Koresh Redux or whoever. So that there's a balance here. So I'm going to come, just take a different stance and say, let's hear it for government. I'm all for big government.
Well, what Jerry said, it's not about big or small government. It's about good government versus bad government. Is the government going to help the people, or is it going to hurt the people?
We'll move right on.
I'll touch real quick on the gender, race issue. I'm a very proud working class person. I am by no means middle class. I work construction. I sell my labor every day. My wife is a nurse. She's also involved. A lot of people I knew in Boston, very working class. And I have seen, the middle class layers coming in. But you also have to understand that, who has the extra time to give multiple weeknights? Who has the time? I've been an activist for years, so I dedicated my life to this. But not every working class person has the extra time to go do this. Not everyone knows about this. And there's Occupy El Barrio and The Hood, which has brought in a lot of different
What are those?
groups. I don't even know exactly where they're located or centralized, but I know Boston has a chapter or each, or they've started in Boston.
They have, it's all on Facebook. They have Occupamos de los Barrios.
Occupados.
And before I get to
Ocupemos
Marianne,
el barrio.
before I get to Marianne, I just want to tell our audience that Marianne is also an author. And I'm shamefully going to give her a little plug here because we're coming on the show.
Like?
And Marianne O'Connor, it's Haunted Hikes of New Hampshire. The book glows in the dark. And it's about basically trails that are...
It's about ghost stories related to New Hampshire. It's available at Barnes & Noble, on Amazon, and you can get it really just about anywhere if you Google it. So,
Okay. And your closing thoughts as far as our discussion.
on my closing thoughts in terms of reaching out to other populations or to minorities, again, we're a very young movement, and it's hard for us to be in the mindset of what another culture might be thinking about what this is. So I think we have to take that into respect. We talked about this last night about how do we know what a Hispanic person's perspective of this is going to be? How do we know if they want us to reach out? Is it assumed that we are supposed to do that? I think we have to really ground ourselves and recheck that and think about that. And if help is being asked of us, then by all means, we'll be there. And I think that is slowly beginning to happen. I said earlier, we've reached out to an African-American family who's been foreclosed from their home up in French Hill. In another perspective, a Hispanic, a Latino artist has approached me on Facebook wanting to be involved in the Occupy the Primary event that we have coming up. What can he do? Who does he contact? So little by little, I think those waves are trickling out there. I don't think that it's right for us to assume that we're supposed to take action and aggressively campaign to have people come in. I think it's really, again, going back to individual accountability. If someone wants that themselves and they know how to advocate for themselves, we're here if they want to be a part of that too.
Thank you.
Marianne said it all. I mean, Occupy is a 3-month-old movement, and Occupy Nashua is 1 month old. It's a very important issue that people are aware of. There's an open invitation. Come help.
Do you have any closing thoughts, Simone?
No, just thank you, Kevin.
And I want to thank you,
Representative,
Simone. And
yes.
I want to thank all my guests, all of you.
Look, we appreciate you. Thank you,
and
really.
you're very welcome to come on the
Yeah.
show and maybe come back at another time and update us
I'd love
if
to.
that's okay.
Yeah.
And as you can hear, there's the music. And for our guests, thank you for joining us for another hour of Gate City Chronicle. Until next week, remember, it's your city. Thanks for joining us.